happening, Gore Fiends? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having an absolutely killer day. Thank you for tuning in once again. So today, we're going to hit up a movie review, and that movie is for none other than Terrifier 3. Now, Terrifier 3 sees us continue the story set up by Part 2. The main story takes place 5 years after the events of the second film and takes place during the Christmas holidays. We once again follow our main character, Sienna, as she struggles with the trauma that Art has caused her in the past. So her and her brother are trying to cope with this, move forward, and get their lives on track. But of course, Art the Clown returns and chaos ensues. Now, going into this review, I have now seen this movie 3 times, and every time I see it, I seem to enjoy it more. I must admit, I think I had myself a little overhyped in the beginning. This was my most anticipated movie of all time, so I was super psyched to check this out. And while it definitely didn't disappoint, it did play out differently than I expected. So at the end of it, I was kind of left a little bit dumbfounded going, oh, okay. What's this and what's this? I definitely had more questions than I got answers to, so that threw me for a little bit of a loop. But every time I watch this, I enjoy it more. It's definitely a Terrifier film. If you've enjoyed the other installments in this franchise, I can't imagine you won't enjoy this one. Now, this is definitely a very dark and sinister film. This might be the most vile we've ever seen Art the Clown be. Now, of course, I think we want that from Art the Clown. Anyone that's watching these films kind of secretly is rooting for Art the Clown despite how despicable his acts might be. Let's face it, Art the Clown is the new icon of horror. I don't think anybody's really made this sort of impression in the horror scene since I would probably say Ghostface for Scream. And frankly, for me, I'm not even a huge Scream fan. Yes, I'm sorry, Scream fans. I don't mind it. It's decent, but it definitely isn't what I really wanted from that sort of franchise. However, Art the Clown brings all the terror that I could hope for and all the gore and guts. I definitely enjoy me some gore, and that's definitely on display in this film. Now, I want to try to keep this review fairly spoiler free. I do have a few questions that I want to ask you guys, but I'll leave that for the end of the review. So at that point, I'll give you a warning that I'm going to disclose a few spoilers, and you can leave the video at that point if you have not seen it already. I definitely highly recommend that you go check this out before checking out people's reviews, because of course most people are probably going to give away key points, and if you're really invested in this series and want to have it unfold for yourself, check it out first. Come back to the reviews later. But as far as the story goes here, I don't feel like there is a lot of story here. I mean, there's a lot that takes place within the film, but all those burning questions that most of us had in the second film really aren't answered here. And I think that's the biggest con of the movie. Now, I know Damien doesn't want to spell it out for everybody. He definitely wants to portray this in sort of a Lynchian sort of format where little things are kind of leaked and might, give hints towards things, but doesn't want to spell it out for you. He doesn't want to treat you like an idiot. And I think when you watch the film, there's certain things in this you can definitely deduct based off of what happens. Of course, as can be seen in the trailer, this time around, Art has a sidekick. We get the Victoria Hayes character who returns and definitely plays a much bigger part in this film. You'll kind of understand when you see it where her character comes from. Again, not spelled out to you, but you can kind of deduct how this happens and what takes place here. But this movie is vile, it's deplorable, it's absolutely disgusting, and it's definitely going to cross the line for a few people. Now, it's pretty hard to cross the line with this guy. I'm pretty desensitized to everything horror, and nothing really bothers me, again, because I know it's fake. I see the artistry that goes into this. I'm interested in filmmaking. I like all those behind-the-scene elements that take place and what goes into making movies. So again, on a level of fakeness, you really can't push any boundaries with me. I don't think you're going to shock me or really make something that's really going to push me over the edge. However, for other people, I could definitely see this being extreme and a bit too much for their eyes. But I think most of us Terrifier fans that are going into this know what to expect and really won't be bothered. So I think it's a little overhyped in the sense of, oh, people are walking out, people are fainting, people are vomiting. If you walked into this not knowing what to expect, then I think that's kind of on you. Anyone who's familiar with these movies is going to know exactly what they're getting into, and I don't think this will be a shocker. I think you'll definitely enjoy it. It's definitely a gorehound's fantasy for sure. And if you were looking for a lot of answers, unfortunately, you're not really going to get them here. In fact, I have more questions about this film than I did going into it. So there's definitely a lot of lore to still be discovered and a lot of story to yet unfold, which I think we'll get a lot more of that in part 4. We know that Damien has an ultimate ending to this. Now, whether part 4 will be the finale in this franchise or not is yet to be seen. I can see it getting derailed. I can see this going to at least 5 films. I do think he ultimately wants to have it play out as a full story that finishes and doesn't want to overstay his welcome. But at the same time, I mean, you're riding high on this franchise. Everybody loves Art the Clown. He's the new icon of horror. So it's probably kind of hard to just ignore what you have there and just move on. You're definitely going to want to eat that up a little bit. And I think in this film, we really see Damien just having fun with the Christmas setting. There's a lot of that taking place in here, and a lot of it doesn't feel like it's important to the story whatsoever. It just feels like a kid in a candy shop having a great time and giving us some crazy visuals and a lot of silliness, and just really, again, enjoying the Art the Clown character. As far as the actors go in this, again, the strong point in this is definitely Sienna Shaw's character, played by Lauren Lambert. She did an amazing job in this. She does a fantastic job playing somebody who's dealing with PTSD and the trauma that took place in her life. She really gives the performance here that really, brings the heart to the movie, I think. Beyond that, of course, we get Jonathan again, but he's a little bit of a different character in this one. He's a little bit more standoffish, is a little bit worried about Sienna, doesn't totally believe her. Again, Sienna is seeing things in this, so we never really know if what she's seeing is actually happening or just in her mind. So I can understand the doubt from Jonathan's character. We get introduced to a character named Cole and Mia. Cole is Jonathan's dorm mate, and Mia is his girlfriend who is obsessed with true crime, and of course wants to get some information out of Sienna and Jonathan based around the Miles County killer. We also get the family members of Sienna in this. We are introduced to her Uncle Greg, her Aunt Jessica, and her niece Gabby. Now we get a few throwaway characters in this that, while their performances aren't throwaway, they really don't play a bigger part in the whole story, and it's just there as more of a set piece. But everybody in this did a fantastic job. I don't think any of the acting was particularly bad by any means. If anything, it's probably some of the best that we've gotten out of the series so far. I also thought Terrifier 2 had great acting. So again, it depends what you're expecting, what you consider to be great acting. When we're watching a horror splatterfest movie, I don't expect Oscar award winning, performances here. I just want something that's solid and believable and will, keep the story moving, and we definitely get that. But I do feel that Lauren really brought the A game here, and that she's really the strongest character in this whole film. Of course, aside from Art the Clown himself, because we always love Art and his antics and his insanity. That just makes the movie what it is and really brings the fun to the table. So without him, we wouldn't even have the movies, but it's those two characters that really bring the life to this story. In regards to the sound design, nothing stood out as being especially outstanding to me. I think it was solid. It all worked for what it needed to do. There was definitely a moment early on in the film that, without giving too much away, we do get an off-screen death. And the sound design here is really what sells it and sends it home. So they definitely did a great job there. Everything sounds great. It all works as it needs to. Again, we get a great soundtrack here with Paul Wiley at the helm. We get some Christmas music in there that definitely suits the theme. It all plays out nicely. It works well for the film. I have no complaints there whatsoever. I think they did a great job. And of course, you can't talk about these films without talking about the blood and the gore and the FX in these. We love those practical effects. It's one thing that I found fresh about this series. After seeing so many movies that are just soaked in CGI, it was so refreshing to watch a movie that really brings it, and we get some brutality and insanity, and it's basically all practical effects. I know there's some very minor VFX work in this, but none of it's distracting. It all works very nicely. It just blends together perfectly, and I think this is great what they're doing. Of course, Terrifier definitely brings the gore in this one. It's definitely the most over-the-top one. Now, the second one's quite over-the-top with gore as well, so it's kind of hard to compare the two. This one feels a bit darker with its gore for some reason. Maybe it's just the setting of the film itself and the way it all plays out and the look of it. But I do feel like this one feels a bit more sinister and evil. But if you're just talking straight up gore and blood, I feel like it's pretty close on par. Parts 2 and 3 are both brutal films that have a lot of disgusting moments, and it all just plays out great, and it's a lot of fun to watch, and it's really, some crazy technical expertise by the effects teams here. Obviously, Damien did the second film, and we have a different team that did the third movie here, and they did a fantastic job. I would never think at any moment, oh, they didn't live up to the past films. They definitely do, if not exceeding it. I would say that the gore in this maybe comes across as a little bit more realistic. So yeah, great job by the team. It's definitely a gore fest. It's definitely an experience to see in the theater. It's very over the top. I think anyone looking for that aspect of the film is definitely not going to be disappointed. It definitely delivers on all fronts there. Now, as far as rating this film goes, I've gone to see this movie now 3 times. I'm going to go see it for a 4th today. Every time I watch it, I enjoy it more, but it's very hard to put it in a list. Where does it sit in comparison to the first 2 films? I do feel like this movie needs to sit a little bit longer with me, and I'll be happy to see it at home a few times and just have a home experience with it before I can really deduct exactly where it sits. But if I had to pick at the moment, I would say that probably the first film sits around a 9 out of 10 for me. I think part 2 is a 9.5 out of 10 for me, being one of my all-time favorite films now. I just love what 2 did. It's almost the perfect film for me in so many ways. So the third one, while even going into this, I really didn't think would be part 2 for me, and I have to say, I really don't think it does. It's definitely damn close, and I think it sits in between 1 and 2 for me. I would probably give it a 9.25. Again, parts 1 and 3 are so damn close together that it's really hard to judge, and that might change in time, but I love all these films. They're a ton of fun. You know, they're so over the top and just crazy that there's no way a real horror fan couldn't enjoy these. Of course, if you don't like this sort of horror, maybe you're more of a fan of psychological horror and not really into gore and guts, then I get why this isn't for you. It's not for everybody by any means. I, however, love it. You know, the insane, over-the-top violence and gore and guts is something that I very much enjoy, again, because I know it's fake. You know, I like the artistry that goes into it. I love the insanity. I love when directors push limits. It just makes for a lot of fun, and it's just something I can get behind. Again, not for everybody, but definitely for this guy. So I very much enjoyed the film. I think it sits up there with the rest of them. You know, it's definitely a great addition to the franchise. Really, the only con I can say at all is that we really didn't get much in the way of answers with this film, but of course we've got more coming in the future, so I'm looking forward to that. Really, the worst part about this is that I gotta wait 2 years before I get any answers. I mean, we know that we're not going to get a Terrifier 4 for at least, 2 years. So I'm going to guess probably 2026, maybe again around Halloween time or something like that. So it's a long wait now with all these questions that at least, the community will be able to have fun with. We'll all be asking each other, what do you think is going to happen? How do you feel about how this played out? There's a lot to be said about this and a lot of questions to be answered. But again, that's part of the fun. I like discovering the lore of this and kind of like wondering where it's going to go. I like the mystique behind it all. I don't want everything spelled out to me. Don't get me wrong here. I might say that that's a little bit of a con, that we don't really get answers here. But I just want some minor answers. We get these inklings of moments within the film that go, okay, like, where's this going? And ultimately, I feel the end of this kind of leaves us in the same position we were in the end of the second film. So we're not really any further ahead. This just feels like a crazy ride to watch, and it's definitely a blast. I'm definitely happy I got to see it in theaters. Now, major spoilers moving forward. I am curious. We get a point in this movie that, of course, towards the end of the film, basically almost everybody is dead. And of course we get that reveal of Jonathan's death. Do we actually think that Jonathan is dead? I see a lot of people asking this question. I'm curious to see what your guys' thoughts are on this. I do think he is dead. I know a lot of people are annoyed by the off-screen death, but I think the way it all played out and building up to that point of Victoria telling Sienna that, this isn't Gabby, this is Jonathan, doesn't work if you showed what happened to Jonathan, because then you're just like, okay, well, we already know. So it doesn't have any impact. I think that's why we got the off-screen death. So we do get child deaths in this. Of course, we see the killings off-screen. So it definitely does have a line it doesn't want to cross. I know I've seen a lot of people say that as parents, if they had actually showed this, that'd probably be the moment that they would walk out and wouldn't be able to deal with this franchise. And of course, Damien still wants to have mass appeal with this. So he wants to bring the vile element to it, but also make it consumable. So I think that's why we get this. It makes sense. And I think that Jonathan's death, if we had showed that, would be in the same vein. I mean, yes, Jonathan's almost an adult at this point, but he's a young adult. As far as I'm concerned, he is still a kid. I think if we had showed him getting hacked up or whatever they would have done to him, I think the audience really wouldn't have appreciated that. I think they would have been like, this is a character that we actually cared about and were rooting for. And while you can maybe say that about other characters as well, I feel like he's less of a dispensable character, and it just would have been in poorer taste. Again, it wouldn't have bothered me any. You can be as in poor taste as you want. Knowing that it's fake, I'll take anything. I don't really care. But I think that would have been a dividing factor for, mainstream audiences. Which, to think that this is being, shown to mainstream audiences feels a little weird in itself. But I think that's why they went that route. Now, if you think he's still alive, give me your reasons why you think he's still alive. I know we don't actually see his death. I realize that it's just a skull and we get a pair of glasses and we get the use of his voice. But I think that's supposed to be enough. Now, one other part in this that I thought was definitely interesting is the letter that Jonathan sends Sienna earlier on in the film, where it basically says that in order for the evil to enter this world, that it has to use a vessel, and that has to be somebody truly evil, like a serial killer. So from this, we can deduct that in the first Terrifier film, that Art is in fact human. I'm going to say that he was a serial killer clown that just kills people for fun. He's just twisted. But of course, with his death in the end of the first film, that's when the evil is able to use him for a vessel. So in part 2, I think we definitely are getting a demonic Art the Clown. It's no longer him. I think it's the evil force controlling him, which of course carries through into this film. The one question I do have though is at the end of the film we see Victoria die. So I couldn't help but wonder, is the Victoria demon that is actually controlling Art, is this just another demon and there's another evil that really is orchestrating this whole thing? Because obviously Art doesn't die when she does. So I'm kind of curious about that. What's your guys' thought on this? You know, is Art just his own entity, you know, that just is run by evil? You know, does the death of Victoria play a bigger part in this? Is Victoria actually dead? Obviously, her blood seeping through the floorboards caused this, you know, opening to hell or wherever it is they're from to open up. And that's where we get the whole, you know, tragedy with Gabby and what's going to carry the story forward. I'm not really too sure about that. Again, I have a lot of questions here that I don't know the answers to. So I'm curious if anyone else picked up on some details that maybe I missed that maybe gives a little bit of, you know, foresight into this. If you did, feel free to let me know. Happy to hear from you guys. But yes, I'm definitely curious to see where this franchise moves forward in the future. And the one thing that I really did like about this ending is that it came full circle with the 9th circle. So we obviously get this scene with this woman on a bus. Art gets on the bus. He's obviously damaged and in bad shape, but the woman's reading a book that says the 9th circle, which of course is the original short that Art the Clown was featured in, that you can see on All Hallows Eve. So I do feel like this will play a bigger part in the overall story. I do feel like Art and Victoria's character and stuff is all going to be derivative from the 9th circle, and that will all come full circle in the whole story. Again, how it's all going to play out exactly, I have no idea, and I do like the fact that, you know, things aren't just thrown in our face. We have to think about this. But yeah, definitely enjoyed this film. It was a ton of fun. I'm glad I got to go out and see it. I'm glad the wait's over because the wait has been killing me. I can't wait to check out all these films in order. I did have a little bit of a telethon on my second viewing for this, where me and my buddy actually watched All Hallows Eve, Terrifier 1, Terrifier 2, and then went to the theater to watch Terrifier 3. It didn't really help me with anything. It didn't really point anything else out. I'm well versed with these original films, so it's really whether or not I missed details in the third one that, you know, aren't really grabbing me. But again, that's why I want to hear from you guys. What did you guys think about this? Are you happy with the results of this film? Did it play out the way you want it? Were expectations met? And where does it sit for you in the grand scheme of the whole franchise? Is this your favorite in the entry? Did you not like it? You know, is it somewhere in the middle? Happy to hear from you guys. Happy to engage. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in for this video. I appreciate all of your support. Of course, if you have a moment to help support the channel, then please subscribe. It helps the channel grow. And pale that like button. And if you'd like to hear future updates, stab that notification bell down below for that. Also, don't forget about the socials down below. You can follow me on all of the major platforms. I've added a link to the trailer for this film, as well as an IMDB link if you want to get more information about it. But if you haven't made your way out to see this and you're a fan of the other films, then I hope you get out to see it. It's definitely a lot of fun. It's worth the theater experience for sure. But once again, thank you so much for all of your support and taking the time to watch these videos. I hope everybody has an absolutely killer day. Cheers, everybody. Stay sick.